Raymond, if you stay with us, I have some news to bring. And US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has announced the deployment of additional military assets to the Middle East to bolster defences amid escalating tensions between Iran and Israel. Hegseth emphasised that protecting American forces is the top priority. The move follows several days of intensifying conflict between the two regional powers. The Pentagon's action signals growing concern over regional stability and aims to deter threats to US personnel and interests in the area. I want to bring another update before we go back to our discussion, and this is a comment that Donald Trump has made. He has said that everyone in Tehran should evacuate. That update that we have had in of course, coming amid strikes from both sides. Iran have said that they will continue to strike Israel into the morning with air raid sirens and swathes of people heading into their bunkers on a regular basis. Israel continuing their assault on military and nuclear sites. Now, Trump putting this warning out. A clear message. Whether that is a direct move ahead of an expected strike, we're not sure as of yet. This could be Trump rhetoric, but the situation in the Middle East is, of course, consuming a lot of thought and conversation that is going on in geopolitics at the moment and at the G7 summit. I'm going to bring in Daniel Roth, who is a research director for United Against Nuclear Iran, who is joining us from New York. We brought you that update that Pete Hegseth had there, talking about a movement of military assets towards the region, saying that this is coming, of course, amid the escalating tensions and to bolster what is already in the region in terms of US bases and US military assets. What's the significance of US involvement in this? Of course, the US were discussing a nuclear deal with Iran. Israel, many think, took matters into their own hands, but have had the support of the United States. Daniel, could this become a dual-pronged attack with support from the US in a military capacity, potentially using the bunker-busting bombs that we know are needed to tackle some of Iran's nuclear sites?
Well, hello, Joshua. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's quite significant. I think that Secretary Hegseth has made that announcement quite clear. Naturally, I think Israel and America have always been pretty aligned on this, despite what some in the media have been saying about there being an internal split within the administration. I think ultimately it is the kingmaker, the real man behind everything is the president himself. I mean, with respect to those tactical considerations, the bunker bomb, yes, I think if Israel really thinks it really wants them, I think America would be happy to loan those B-2 bombers and those MOB, those big penetrating bombs to get through the Fordo enrichment center, which is the one that's still standing. Natanz reportedly is pretty much collapsed. Certainly on the upper structures, the lower structures we're not sure about. On the Iranian side, though, I mean, this is you just mentioned about President Trump's Truth Social post there. I think that's just a natural response to Iranian belligerence. Iran was quite clear that despite the US saying that this was a unilateral Israeli action once they were striking Iran a couple of days ago or 3 nights ago, they were very clear to say that this was just on the Israelis. However, the Iranians immediately said none of this could have happened without the authorization of the Americans, and we attribute blame as much to the US as to Israel. So I think that this kind of rhetoric from the president is probably in response to Iran ramping up the bellicosity of things as well. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, I think the US has Israel's back, and that will include military assets and kinetic action if it comes down to it.
Yes, Daniel, Trump has reiterated his comment that Iran need to get a deal done. I want to look at the previous Iran nuclear deal that was agreed in 2015. You will probably have a lot more insight into that than most, but we know that that deal took time. It was involving multiple countries. It wasn't done in a short period of time, years in the making. Donald Trump has come in, he sent Steve Witkoff, who isn't traditionally a diplomat, and has given Iran 60 days to get a deal done. Was that firstly unrealistic? And given that that's the time frame Israel have used for their assault, was there a chance of diplomacy here if it had been given more time?
I don't think time was the important factor in this. I think the important factor was the Iranian regime's propensity to back down on its nuclear program. And as has been quite clear since the early 2000s when it was revealed, the Iranians simply do not want to back down. They feel like they've invested, I think some estimates say probably $100 billion in that program over the years. I think that's a very conservative estimate. So there's a kind of sunk cost fallacy that they're engaging in. In terms of that 2015 deal, though, yes, it took many years to come to fruition. However, this time around, there could have been a deal within 60 days. I've got no doubt about that. Had the Iranians simply said, okay, we're going to stop enrichment, we're going to dismantle our uranium enrichment plants. We understand that the world does not trust us on enrichment. This is the big thing. They could have had this regional consortium, like many other countries that are party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But Iran, like the Soviet Union during the Cold War, just has this insistence on keeping this uranium, this nuclear program, clearly not for civilian purposes, as they always say. Every single interview that I ever see a regime person talk about, they say this was civilian purposes. We have this fatwa against the nukes. Absolute nonsense. No other country that's a signatory to the NPT or that does not have nuclear weapons right now is enriching to the kind of levels, 60%, that Iran has been hitting over the past year or so. And then that's a short step to 90%, which is weaponization. Ultimately, yes, the time, I think President Trump did a good thing there. 60 days, do not let the Iranians just keep slow walking this process. They could have slow walked it to the October deadline where snapback sanctions from the UN were no longer a threat. They could have slow walked it even 4 years and had a new, more friendly president in power in the US. So 60 days, that's exactly what I would have done.
Thank you, Daniel. We are going to briefly move away